Sunday family dinners at our house were always a tension-filled preview of what my future would not include. I watched my dad praise my brother Jackson, grooming him to take over our furniture manufacturing company worth $4.7 million. Despite working there since 16, knowing every detail of production, I was practically invisible. My grandfather, who founded the business, observed everything silently from his seat at the head of the table. I never expected what happened next would change everything. Where are you watching from today? Let me know in the comments. Hit subscribe and stick around because family businesses can hide the deepest secrets. I started working at Porter's Fine Furniture when I was 16, sweeping floors after school and during summers. Now, at 34, I have spent over half my life dedicated to this business. Our company is not just any furniture manufacturer. My grandfather, Walter Porter, built this legacy from nothing 60 years ago, starting with a small workshop making custom tables for local families. Today, we employ 65 craftspeople and ship our high-end furniture across the entire country. The sawdust and wood oil smells that fill our workshop feel like home to me. Every piece of machinery, every wood type, every finishing technique is part of my blood. I worked my way through every department learning directly from our most skilled artisans. By 25, I could build our signature armoire from scratch, something even my dad never mastered. My brother Jackson is 38, 4 years older, with an MBA from an expensive university. He wears tailored suits to work and has an office overlooking the production floor, though he rarely comes down to visit. His knowledge of furniture comes from PowerPoint presentations and profit margin calculations, not from hands-on experience. While I spent weekends learning how to hand-carve decorative moldings, Jackson was playing golf with Dad and his business associates. Our father, Robert, took over from Grandpa Walter 20 years ago. Under his leadership, the company grew significantly, but something changed in the process. The obsession with craftsmanship that Grandpa instilled gave way to concerns about efficiency and profit margins. Dad still talks about quality and marketing materials, but his eyes light up when discussing quarterly profits, not when examining a perfectly executed dovetail joint. Grandpa Walter is now 85 and semi-retired, though he still maintains an office at the factory and visits weekly. His health has been declining, but his mind remains sharp. He notices everything, saying little but watching carefully. Despite stepping away from daily operations, Grandpa kept certain aspects of the business close, including some key ownership documents. My mom, Linda, tries her best to maintain peace. At family dinners, when Dad praises Jackson's latest cost-cutting idea, she makes sure to mention my contributions too, but the pattern has been clear since childhood. Jackson was groomed for leadership, while I was valued for my technical skills but never seen as executive material. The current tension centered around a major business decision. Dad and Jackson wanted to outsource most of our manufacturing to overseas factories. The proposal would maintain a small local workshop for custom pieces while mass-producing our standard line in Asia at a fraction of the cost. When they first presented the idea 6 months ago, I felt physically ill. I spent a whole weekend examining the proposal, identifying all the ways our quality would suffer. The overseas samples did not match our standards. The joints were machine-pressed, not hand-fitted. The finishes lacked the depth that our customers pay premium prices for. But my concerns were brushed aside as resistant to change. Rachel, my fiancée, has been my rock through all of this. We met 3 years ago when she came to order a custom dining table, and she understands how deeply I care about the business. She supports me, but worries about the toll the family tension takes. I still remember being 8 years old, standing on a stool in Grandpa's workshop, learning to sand with the grain. He would place his weathered hand over mine, guiding the movement. Those are the moments that connected me to this business, not the profit and loss statements Dad and Jackson obsess over. The official announcement came during our quarterly company meeting last spring. The conference room was packed with department heads and senior staff. Dad stood at the front, Jackson at his side, as he revealed the succession plan. I will never forget his exact words. As I look toward the future of Porter's Fine Furniture, I am proud to announce that Jackson will be stepping into the role of Chief Operating Officer effective next month. His business acumen and strategic vision are exactly what this company needs to thrive in the modern marketplace. The polite applause felt like a physical pain in my chest. 18 years of dedication, of learning every aspect of our business, of building relationships with employees and customers, and my name was not even mentioned as a consideration. I kept my face neutral, feeling the sympathetic glances from the production managers who worked with me daily. After the meeting, I asked Dad for a few minutes alone. In his office, surrounded by awards and press clippings, I tried to understand the decision. Dad, I want to talk about the announcement. I have been preparing myself to take on more responsibility. I know this business inside and out. He barely looked up from his computer. Porter, you are valuable where you are. The floor respects you. But leadership requires more than technical knowledge. Jackson has been preparing for this his entire career. His entire career has been 4 years in business school and 7 years in an office. I have been here 18 years. Dad's expression hardened. This decision is final. I need you to support your brother, not undermine him. The following weeks brought rapid changes. Jackson began implementing new procedures without consulting the production team. Quality control checks were reduced to save time. Materials were sourced from cheaper suppliers. The small details that had distinguished our furniture were classified as inefficiencies. I noticed Grandpa Walter watching these developments during his visits. His eyes narrowed when Jackson explained how reducing the curing time for our finishes would increase output. Grandpa caught my gaze across the room but said nothing. Long-time employees started coming to me with concerns. Thomas, our head finisher, who had been with the company for 30 years, showed me how the new lacquer was already showing micro cracks after a week. Maria from upholstery brought in samples of the new imported fabric that wore through after minimal testing. I documented everything and brought it to Jackson. His response was dismissive. These are minor adjustments during the transition. The customers will not notice, and it improves our bottom line. When I pushed back, he reminded me of the hierarchy. Dad put me in charge of operations, Porter. Your job is to implement, not question. The breaking point came when the Richardsons' clients, who had purchased from us for 3 generations, canceled an order after receiving a piece with visible flaws. I spent an entire weekend in the shop, personally crafting a replacement, ensuring it met our traditional standards. The client was delighted, but neither Dad nor Jackson acknowledged the save. That night, Rachel found me in our garage, working on a small side table. Woodworking had become my therapy. Maybe it is time to consider other options, she suggested gently. You could start your own custom shop. Your talent is being wasted. This is not just about furniture, I replied, running my hand along the grain of the oak I was shaping. It is about my grandfather's legacy, about the families who have depended on this business for generations. I cannot just walk away. Later that week, Grandpa Walter found me in the prototype shop. He examined the replacement piece I had made for the Richardsons. Good work, he said simply. Then, how do you feel about the new direction? I hesitated, not wanting to criticize my father and brother to him. I have some concerns about quality. Grandpa nodded. Walter Porter made a promise when he started this business. Excellence without compromise. He did not add more, just patted my shoulder before leaving. That evening, Dad called a management meeting, but did not include me. I later learned they had discussed accelerating the overseas transition. My position was being eroded piece by piece, and the company I loved was transforming into something I barely recognized. The tension reached a breaking point at Sunday dinner, 3 months later. Mom had prepared pot roast Grandpa's favorite, hoping for a peaceful family meal. Instead, It became the battleground for the future of our company. Jackson arrived late, bubbling with excitement about his recent trip to Asia. Without preamble, he announced, "The contracts are ready to sign. We can transition 80% of production overseas within 6 months. We will keep just 12 employees for custom work and final assembly." My fork clattered against the plate. 80%. That is 53 people losing their jobs. People who have been with us for decades. Dad nodded approvingly at Jackson. "The severance packages will be fair. This is the future, Porter." "This betrays everything Grandpa built," I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. "Our reputation is built on American craftsmanship, on quality you can feel." Jackson rolled his eyes. "The market does not care about sentimentality. They want affordable luxury. Our testing shows customers cannot tell the difference in blind comparisons. That is because your tests are designed to hide the differences. I have seen the quality issues firsthand." The Richards order the Jacobson table, the Martin bedroom set. All complaints from long-standing customers. Dad slammed his hand on the table. "Enough. Those were isolated incidents during a transition period. They are warning signs," I insisted. "Warnings we are ignoring." The argument escalated. Jackson detailed how competitive pressures made the change necessary. I countered with evidence of our premium market position. Dad sided with Jackson at every turn. "Either get on board or find another job." Porter Dad finally snapped. "I will not have this division in my company." Throughout the heated exchange, Grandpa Walter remained silent, his eyes moving between us. When he finally spoke, it was only to ask Mom to pass the salt, but I caught his meaningful glance. The next day at work, Dad and Jackson gathered all employees to announce the overseas transition. I stood at the back of the shop, watching the color drain from faces as people realized their livelihoods were at risk. Thomas the finisher, 62 years old, and unlikely to find new skilled work, removed his glasses to wipe his eyes. Maria, from upholstery, reached for her coworker's hand in silent support. My sense of betrayal deepened when I discovered Jackson had already been meeting with overseas manufacturers for over a year. In his office after hours, I found documentation showing the full extent of the changes, not just manufacturing, but cheaper materials throughout. The samples in the testing program had been carefully selected to mask differences, while standard production would use even lower-grade materials. When Jackson found me reviewing the documents, his facade cracked. "What are you doing in my office? Learning the truth about what you plan to do to this company." I answered, holding up comparison charts. "This company is my birthright," he hissed. "Dad promised me this since we were kids. You might have Grandpa wrapped around your finger with your perfect dovetail joints and hand-carved whatever, but Dad makes the decisions now." The bitterness in his voice shocked me. "This is not about who gets the company, Jackson. It is about preserving what makes it special. Save the speeches. In 6 months, I will be effectively running everything, and your precious craftsmen will be training their replacements before cleaning out their lockers." That night, I could not sleep. Rachel found me at 3 in the morning staring at old photos of Grandpa and me in the workshop. "You cannot fix this alone," she said gently. "I cannot abandon the company either. Not the people who taught me everything I know." I began meticulously documenting all the problems with the outsourcing plan, the quality issues, the customer complaints. If I could build a strong enough business case, maybe I could still change Dad's mind. But with each passing day, the plans progressed. Equipment was inventoried for sale. Training manuals were created for overseas workers. Then came the call from Grandpa Walter, "Come see me Saturday." At my house, not the office. Grandpa's colonial-style home stood, as it always had, a testament to permanence in a changing world. When I arrived that Saturday morning, I was surprised to find him in his study rather than his workshop. "Sit down, Porter," he said, his voice weaker than I remembered. Close up, I could see how much he had aged in recent months. The strong hands that once shaped magnificent pieces of furniture now trembled slightly as he poured us coffee. "How bad is your health, really?" I asked, suspicion growing. Grandpa gave a half-smile. "Worse than anyone knows. Doctor gives me a few months at best. Cancer. I have refused treatment." The news hit me like a physical blow. "Dad knows. No one knows except you now. But that is not why I asked you here." He leaned forward. "I have been watching everything, Porter. The changes, the shortcuts, the plans." I felt tears threatening. "I tried to stop it, Grandpa. I failed. Did you know that when I started this company, everyone told me I was a fool? Mass production was the future. Handcrafted furniture was dying. But I believed people would always value quality they could feel with their hands furniture that would outlive them." He rose slowly and walked to the window. "Your father never truly understood that. He saw the business as a way to gain status, to make money. Jackson is the same, but worse because he has no connection to the craft at all." I started to respond, but was interrupted by the doorbell. Grandpa checked his watch. Right on time. "Let him in, would you?" I opened the front door to find an elderly man in a crisp suit carrying a leather briefcase. "Ah, you must be Porter," the man said, extending his hand. "Marcus Sullivan. I have been your grandfather's attorney for 40 years. Confused, I led him to the study. Grandpa greeted the lawyer warmly and motioned for us both to sit. "What I am about to tell you will change everything," Grandpa said. "When I stepped down as CEO 20 years ago, everyone assumed I transferred full ownership to your father. That is not entirely accurate, Mr. Sullivan opened his briefcase and removed several documents. "Walter retained controlling interest in the company," the lawyer explained. "Your father has been operating as CEO, but the fundamental ownership remained with your grandfather." I struggled to process this information. "Dad does not own the company. He owns 30%, Grandpa clarified. "I kept 51%. Insurance, I called it, in case my vision for the company was ever threatened." Mr. Sullivan handed Grandpa a sealed envelope, which he then passed to me. "Inside are the legal documents transferring my controlling interest to you, Porter. The company is valued at $4.7 million. My share represents just over $2.4 million. My hands trembled holding the envelope. "Why not tell Dad? Why not stop the overseas plan yourself?" Grandpa's eyes held mine. "A man needs to make his own decisions, stand by his own principles. I built this company on quality and community, not just profit. If those values matter to you, then you will know what to do." "This will tear the family apart," I whispered. "Perhaps. Or perhaps it will save what matters most." He placed his hand over mine. "Do not open this until the board meeting on Thursday. Think carefully about what you want for the future of Porter's Fine Furniture." After Mr. Sullivan left, Grandpa and I talked for hours about legacy craftsmanship and responsibility. He shared stories I had never heard about the early days, about nearly going bankrupt rather than compromising on materials, about turning down lucrative contracts that would have required cutting corners. "Whatever you decide, I trust," you were his final words, as I left the envelope weighing heavily in my jacket pocket. The days that followed were among the most difficult of my life. I told no one, not even Rachel, about the envelope. I barely slept, torn between loyalty to my father and the promise I had made to my grandfather. Thursday arrived too quickly. The boardroom filled with executives, including Dad at the head of the table and Jackson at his right hand. Grandpa Walter sat quietly in the corner, looking frailer than ever. Dad nodded to him respectfully, but focused on the meeting agenda. Jackson stood to present the final details of the overseas manufacturing plan, complete with charts showing projected cost savings. The pride in Dad's face was unmistakable as Jackson outlined the 5-year growth strategy. With the board's approval today, Jackson concluded we can begin the transition immediately. By this time next year, Porter's Fine Furniture will be positioned as a luxury brand with mid-range production costs, giving us unprecedented profit margins. Dad rose, holding the authorization documents. Before we vote, I want to say how proud I am of this plan and of Jackson for spearheading it. This represents the future of our company. My heart pounded so hard I could barely hear. This was the moment. Once those papers were signed, 53 people would lose their livelihoods, and the quality that defined us would be compromised forever. I have something to say, I heard myself speak. The room fell silent, all eyes turning to me in surprise. With shaking hands, I removed the envelope from my jacket. Before any votes are taken, there is a matter of ownership that needs to be clarified. I opened the envelope and passed the documents to Mr. Sullivan, who had arrived just before the meeting. These papers transfer controlling interest of Porter's Fine Furniture to Porter Barrett, effective immediately, the lawyer announced after reviewing them. As majority shareholder, Mr. Barrett now has final authority on all company decisions. The silence that followed was absolute. Jackson's face drained of color, beads of sweat forming on his forehead as the implications became clear. Dad stared at Grandpa Walter in disbelief, then at the documents being passed around the table. "This is impossible," Dad finally sputtered. "I have run this company for 20 years as CEO." Mr. Sullivan clarified, but Walter Porter retained majority ownership. "These transfers are legally binding. I have already filed them with the appropriate authorities." Dad's face flushed with anger. "You manipulative old man," he hissed at Grandpa. "You let me believe all this time." "I let you run the company your way," Grandpa replied calmly, "until you decided to dismantle everything it stands for." Jackson jumped to his feet. "This is a betrayal, a conspiracy." I found my voice. "No, this is about preserving the legacy of craftsmanship and community that built this company. The overseas plan is officially rejected." Dad slammed his fist on the table. "You cannot do this." "Actually, Mr. Sullivan interjected, reviewing another document he can. As majority shareholder, Porter now has the authority to appoint the CEO and board positions as well. The meeting dissolved into chaos. Dad and Jackson stormed out, followed by several executives. Those who remained looked shell-shocked, especially the production managers who had feared for their jobs. Grandpa Walter remained, seated, a faint smile on his lips, as he nodded to me across the room. The fallout was immediate and severe. Mom called that evening crying, saying Dad had been raging for hours, packing a bag to stay at a hotel. Jackson had already consulted his own lawyer about contesting the transfer. I was no longer welcome in their home. Rachel held me as I processed the magnitude of what had happened. "You did what you believed was right," she reassured me. "The question is, what will you do now?" The truth was, I had not planned beyond stopping the overseas transition. Now I owned a multi-million-dollar company with serious family fractures and no clear path forward. Late that night, my phone rang. It was Grandpa. "I know today was difficult," he said, "but remember why Porter's Fine Furniture has survived for 60 years while others failed. It was never just about profit margins." "Dad and Jackson hate me now," I said quietly. "They are hurt and surprised. Pride is a powerful thing, but when the dust settles, family remains family." He paused. "You will make mistakes, Porter. Everyone does. But make them while staying true to the values that matter." That conversation gave me the strength to face the next day. I arrived at the factory early, calling an all-hands meeting. Standing before 65 worried faces, I announced that the overseas transition was canceled. All jobs were secure, and we would refocus on the craftsmanship that made our furniture special. The relief in the room was palpable. Thomas the finisher actually wept, but I also acknowledged the challenges ahead. We still need to address the market pressures that led to the overseas plan, I admitted. I need everyone's ideas on how we can innovate without compromising quality. The following weeks were the hardest of my career. Dad and Jackson refused to speak to me. Several executives resigned. I worked 18-hour days learning aspects of the business I had never managed before, from banking relationships to marketing strategy. But gradually, things began to turn around. We launched a transparency campaign, inviting customers to visit our workshop and see how their furniture was made. We developed a hybrid production model that kept all manufacturing in America but incorporated some automation for consistency. We expanded our apprenticeship program, bringing in young craftspeople eager to learn traditional methods. A month after the board meeting, Jackson surprisingly appeared in my office. He looked uncomfortable but determined. "I still think you and Grandpa planned this behind our backs," he began. "But I have been thinking about my role here. I do have skills the company needs, just not as operations leader." We talked for hours, really listened to each other, perhaps for the first time. Jackson admitted he had never loved furniture making but excelled at financial strategy. By the end of the conversation, we had outlined a new position for him, Chief Financial Officer, focusing on areas where his MBA actually added value. Dad took longer. 3 months passed before he would even take my calls. Mom arranged a dinner at a neutral restaurant where we managed civil conversation centered mostly around her garden. But when our first quarter results showed increased sales despite maintaining production costs, his resistance began to thaw. "Your marketing campaign about American craftsmanship is working," he admitted grudgingly during a chance encounter at Grandpa's house. It was not forgiveness, but it was a start. Meanwhile, Grandpa Walter visited the factory weekly despite his declining health, watching with satisfaction as we returned to the principles he had established. He began recording his knowledge, creating a video archive of techniques and wisdom for future generations. The true healing moment came unexpectedly 6 months later. A major furniture retailer approached us about a prestigious contract, impressed by our renewed commitment to quality. In the meeting, I found myself struggling to address some complex financial questions. "May I?" Jackson interjected, stepping forward with detailed projections he had prepared. His presentation was flawless, securing the deal with favorable terms. Afterward, Dad pulled us both aside. "Your grandfather would be proud of how you worked together today," he said, his voice rough with emotion. It was the closest he had come to acceptance of the new reality. Rachel and I married that fall, with my entire family present. The tensions remained, the relationships forever changed, but we were finding a new equilibrium. And when our first child was born the following spring, it was Dad who brought the family cradle he had carefully restored himself. 1 year after taking ownership, Porter's Fine Furniture was stronger than ever. We had expanded our workforce to 70 craftspeople, opened a training academy for traditional woodworking, and launched a successful mid-priced line that maintained quality while reaching new customers. Most precious of all, Grandpa Walter lived long enough to see it all. Though weakened by his illness, his eyes shone with pride during his weekly visits. In his final days, he summoned me to his bedside. "You have honored the legacy," he whispered, his hand resting on mine. "But you have also made it your own. That is the true meaning of succession." He passed peacefully the next day, leaving behind not just a successful business, but a philosophy that valued quality, community, and integrity above all else. At his funeral, our entire company stood together, including Dad and Jackson. We were different men, now tempered by conflict, but stronger for having faced it. That was 5 years ago. Today, I still walk the production floor daily, knowing every employee by name. I still work with my hands when time allows, keeping my connection to the craft alive. And my son, now 4, already has his own workbench where he learns the feel of wood grain under patient fingers. Some might ask if the family conflict was worth the $4.7 million company, but I know it was never about the money. It was about preserving something authentic in a world increasingly satisfied with shortcuts and approximations. What would you have done in my situation? Would you have opened that envelope? Let me know in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might be facing tough choices in their own family business. Remember that true legacy is not measured in dollars, but in the values we choose to uphold. Thank you for listening, and may you find the courage to stand for what matters most in your own life.